Okay, so here's where we were at last time. I now have my computer turned off in the background, so we shouldn't have fan noises. And then I also have a keylogger. You'll see that pop up with what keys I'm using in the corner. Okay, so here's where we were at last time. I'm going to go ahead and hide that layer so we can see what's going on. Another thing I like to do is create a new window. Essentially what that does, if you go up here to Window, create a new window, that way you can have two windows going. This is the same window as this window here. The nice thing is you can keep this open in the corner over here so you can see the overall composition while you work here, and then you can make sure that everything looks correct and just matches in general, so you don't fine-tune one area and then find out that it looks nothing like the rest of the picture. Alright, so this big mountain here, it's just way too faded out, so I'm going to Image, Brightness, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. Bring up the contrast on that, just make it a little more interesting because it looks absolutely terrible. Throw it into the background, move it back there. I'm not really thrilled. I think we might have too many rocks here. And then, so move them around, kind of adjust, see if, I don't even think we need to use that one. So just playing with the layers, seeing what works well, what we need, what we don't. I think I'm just going to hide that one. Also hide that back one. Okay, now looking at these mountains, it's not really a convincing scene. They just don't look like they belong. So I'm going to name them all. That just makes my world a lot easier so I know what's what. Instead of having to use those little windows to decide, I can look down and say, okay, the mountain to the right, middle mountain, okay. So we're getting those done. And then just darkening and dropping the contrast down a little bit on those, making them look like they're in the background a little bit more. Excuse me. Alright, so I'm going to pull up some reference. So I did more volcano field. So if you notice, everything is one color: brown, 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 gray, brown. So we need to get rid of some of this color. There's no vegetation on any of those, so I'm going to go to Hue and Saturation, which is in Image Adjustments. Drop the saturation down on all of the mountains. So as you can see, it fades them out. They look a little more convincing that way. Just get rid of that vegetation. So I'm going to do that for all of the mountains here. As you can see, they're starting to look like they might belong together. Again, just kind of making making sure they all fit together. And we can always paint color back in later. Right now we're just trying to get a uniformity. And then I am looking to delete. I have these little annoying lines throughout, you can see, so I'm going to go ahead and clean all those up. By the way, this is a longer video today. This is actually 45 minutes for me, so this will be 22 minutes for you guys. Feel free to skip around when I'm doing a little more monotonous stuff like this. So I'm trying to find where those little lines are. This is kind of why you want to, instead of just dragging stuff in and deleting, you can actually grab the information that you want. So I would select that hill and cut it and then paste it, and then you won't get those weird deleted edge lines that I'm dealing with now. So in general, maybe just cut and then paste in, and you'll have new forms instead of weird lines. So I'm doing the same thing with that middle ground. Again, the vegetation isn't what I want. And then I'm going to use perspective here to adjust this rocky plane, because this is coming at me. All the rocks in the background are going to be smaller, so I'm using just the regular Edit, Transform, Perspective tool to kind of shape those rocks a little more convincingly. Have the bigger boulders in front, smaller ones in the back to give some depth to this image. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and make a new layer of it. Put it behind it just again to add another layer of depth. I'm not sure what was going on here. I was struggling apparently. Alright, and then we'll flip it to again kind of get that depth, and then drop it into the background a little bit. Again, use that perspective, shrink the back, bring the rocks forward in the background. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. Play with the lightness. I'm going to darken it up since it is going into the background, even though the light is a little bit darker. Again, darkening up those mountains in the background. It's a dark, gloomy area, so to get some kind of mood. Also, I noticed there's a slight edge around all the mountains, that little white edge. So if I select outside of the mountains, and then I go to my select tool, modify, expand, and I expand it by 2, that will cut kind of the edges off, and then when I delete that, it removes those white little parts around the sides. Again, darken that out. I want to keep kind of a uniform feel for all those back mountains. Because it's nighttime, as we kind of worked through the Star Wars or Harry Potter films, we talked about atmosphere a little bit. With distance at night, things get darker. With distance during the day, things get brighter. More towards the atmospheric color, whichever the case may be. So at night, that would be darkness. You can see the expand selection a little bit better there. So with the mountains, they'll actually get darker because the background is darker, whereas anything on the tree side of things will actually get lighter, kind of more towards the sunny atmosphere. So I'm just dropping all those mountain colors down. We still want to keep some of the light because there is the sun to the far right, but we want to get the kind of darker, moody feel. So I'm going to name some layers. And then I noticed the mountains don't stand out at all against that dark background if you look up here in the right. So I'm adding a layer called atmosphere. Or no, this is actually just an atmosphere layer over these mountains to make them a little more convincing. So as you can see, with that blue, that atmosphere layer, I'm playing with it a little bit, adjusting the brightness. It just makes them feel more like they actually are in the background versus just sitting there. And I just selected this little box here because that's the only area that I really need to affect them. I can actually delete everything else other than the mountain layer later. Then I'm dragging another layer, adding that to just this background. Again, kind of add those layers of depth. Helps with mood, helps just with, in general, believability. And then I'm going through my layers. And again, trying to get rid of all these stupid lines. Trying to find that particular one. I think it takes me way too long here. Alright, there it is. So I'll go ahead. I'm just selecting just the mountain, select inverse, and delete, and it deleted all of that. And then I'm going back in with my eraser and getting rid of some of that. So again, that was just sloppy work. Took me extra time in the long run because I didn't do it right the first time. So, the lessons. So I think this is looking good. As you can tell, or see here, the mountains just completely blend into the sky. So I actually put another layer behind the mountains. Just did a light gradient, and then I'm going to drag that up, playing with different lighting layer settings. So you can see now the mountains stand out. It kind of adds a little bit of a fog, blends that out. So we're just trying to make this a little more interesting in the background, while still keeping that kind of believability. Desaturating some of these little rocks a little bit. Again, we have a little bit of grass still visible, so we just need to ink that out. We have some odd lines here that we'll worry about in a little bit. And then just, again, naming everything helps in the long run when you're, I think right now I'm somewhere near 40 layers, so you can understand why as we get deeper and deeper into this project, you would want to have to make sure everything's named. And then I am kind of undecided on this. I end up just deleting that layer. Just had too many mountains. So now I check, see where the actual guy will be blocking. So I don't need to worry about this area here, but I would need to kind of clean up this whole area here. So the real problem area will be this area along here as I try to mix the two very, very different scenes. I'm just trying to create a gradual rock flow down here instead of a abrupt upness. So I hide him again just so I can work on my project. Alright, so now let's work on the sunny side. So we have this very big background layer. I'm not really liking how the clouds are up here. They're at too much of an angle, but I do really like how that white cloud kind of blends into this darker cloud here. Again, kind of just, I'll pull him on and off throughout this video just to double check where he is, where everything else is, so I can get an idea of placement. Playing with the background layer, I don't necessarily, I like the clouds here, I want some of the blue brought over, so just slightly adjusting, again trying to work in some atmosphere here. As this goes into the background, it's going to be more the color of the sky. And then to match the grass to this world, I also need it to just be a little more green, so I jump into hue and saturation again, and play with that until I get that more lush green versus the yellow that it was. Alright, now for the tree, we're going to do the same thing, modify, expand. So we clicked outside, it shrinks it down on the border, and then you can see we got rid of some of that white around the edges, and we still have a lot of blue and white here. That wouldn't actually show up here. And what I'm doing now is actually feathering this edge, so I get a little bit of a softer edge, then I'm expanding the selection. So I undid my previous delete, so you can see that white layer is there, and then when I delete that, it creates a softer blend for the tree. Now looking over here, this looks really terrible. It just stands out very harshly. Those little specks of blue in there also do. So I'll go in and clean those up. I'm trying to think of a few different options to do that. I go back and forth with undecision here a little bit. So I'm just gonna, in order to show through, I'm gonna copy, then I'll delete that so I can see what's going on, and then just delete everything that's not those little white areas. So just touching those up. And this tree got cropped really weird, so I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do here. Looks a little more like God rays with the sunlight popping through there, adding some light. Not sure if that's what I'm wanting. I'm still kind of trying to delete. I think I might get a new tree. Happy tree is not what I was hoping. That's happy tree, friends. That's its own thing. Alright, so happy tree in a field pulls up what I want. I'm going to just grab basically the base of a tree. I like the branches. I just need the base and branch system. I like this one. It's got some interesting curves and texture to it, so I'll go ahead and paste that. Again, this is really the area that I just want, so I'll cut, paste, get rid of the base background, shrink it down, and bring it over here. Alright, so I really like that. It's a lot more interesting of a profile here, and since this is the key feature, this is an important area of the image. So I'm using my smart selection tool, not always so smart. A lot of unselecting, reselecting, unselecting, reselecting here. Basically, I just want to grab the branches. I don't need these outside leaves. I don't need any of this extra stuff here. So once I have a decent selection, again, I'm selecting everything that I don't want. And then I can just delete it, and I'm left with the base. So I go to my eraser. So we have all this extra stuff here. Looking for my brushes. So I don't want to use a solid brush. These are specific brushes, but as you can see, it's just a kind of chopped out, odd blend of shapes, which gives me a little less uniform of a cut. So I have little bits and pieces, which is more convincing for a tree. That looks like not great on the side, so I'm going to go ahead and pick a more solid, soft-edged one and just clean it up a little bit. Again, deleting those hard edges. And here I'm going to use the clone stamp. Basically what that does is it copies whatever area you select and then wherever you drag, it will duplicate it there. So it's basically a repeat brush. So I'm going to do that. Extend the trunk a little bit to the grassy area here. Go into the branches, grab some leaves. So as you can see, I'm kind of duplicating. I'm just picking an area, and I'm holding Alt to do that. And then I will paint in the brush, or the brush then paints in whatever texture I originally picked. I'm trying to get kind of a smooth edge here. Then I go to the heal tool, which is the little band-aid, and that actually kind of artificial intelligence in Photoshop kind of converts, it gets rid of patterns, helps clean things up. Then I jump to the eraser and just clean up the edges of that tree a little bit. Choose a hard edge to get a hard surface, and then because there is grass on the horizon, use a soft round and then slowly drag it to get kind of a convincing grass feel. Okay, so it still stands out kind of like a sore thumb. So I'm just cleaning up this trunk a little bit, getting rid of some of those bright yellow spots. Not super convincing here. The trunk stands out a lot because the tree is kind of blurry. The trunk was super sharp, so I corrected that with a little blur. Adjusting the lightness, dropping the saturation. Unfortunately, I put leaves in here, so those also lost their saturation. Always good to keep your elements separate. So when I was doing that clone brush and creating new leaves, I should have done that on a different layer. So whenever I adjust the trunk, it wouldn't mess up the leaves here. So this tree, it's looking okay. I think the branches are a little more convincing. I need to get those greens, a little more green, so I'm saturating those up. A lot of this is playing until you find what works, so this isn't direct. I do this as step A, do this as step B. So I'm jumping into the clone tool again. I want to make the tree a more interesting shape. Again, this is a key component of this background, so I'm going to go ahead and select a new brush that adds kind of a more interesting shape for the tree. Shrink that down. And then I'm using the clone tool to essentially grab different shadow parts and then create different shapes for the tree. As you can see, it kind of expands. I'm picking a different brush now that has a little more texture to it. As you can see, I'm growing. Again, you can keep your eye up in this window as you're painting to kind of see the shape of the tree forming as well. So it doesn't always create the best. We have some weird artifacts here. Again, we can kind of paint the tree out by selecting different areas and growing it. And I'm zooming in and out. That's important to keep your details. So as you can see, I just made the tree more full, added some highlights along the edges here. Then I'll go in with an eraser, clean up all this extra stuff that we don't need. Alright, so I like the shape of the tree a little bit better. I might touch on that a little bit later. We don't want it to distract too much, but it's a lot more interesting and believable. So we notice we have a little bit of an artifact here, so I'm going to go ahead and erase that. Wrong layer. Go ahead and erase that on the correct layer, so that way when we do any adjustments, it's a little more convincing. Now this area is very splashed by sun. This is not, so I'm going to go ahead and do what I did with the atmosphere here. So I'm going to grab bright yellow sun, so just pick some of the area here, do an overlay. I created a new layer so I can control this new amount kind of to my own liking. And then I'm just playing with different opacities and different light settings here as well. So I settle on a soft light and then bring it up. As you can see, this looks a lot more natural up here now versus before. Dark and then lighter. Alright. So next I want to get some grass in here. So I'm just going to select an area of grass from this panel here, copy it, edit, transform, flip horizontal. All the edit transform tools up here will come in handy for a variety of different things. I'm not really loving that, so I'm just going to grab some new grass and then choose grass field so we don't get anything inappropriate. I kind of like that. It's got some good foreground elements, middle ground, background texture, so I'm going to save that in so again I can grab it down the road, save it in with all my other reference files, and I'm off screen in that folder, dragging that in. Alright, so there's that grass. I probably shouldn't use this because it's a little low resolution, but again, this will be foreground, so we'll probably blur it out a little bit too. But that blends nicely. Rasterize your layer so you can edit it. And then I am going to need to clean that line up. So one way to do that is, because my hand's using the mouse, so it's a little shaky. So I select, modify, and if you go to smooth, it will actually smooth out your selection lines. 8 didn't do it, so I jumped to 50. As you can see now, that's a lot smoother and a little more convincing of the cut. So that's actually blending really well without me doing a whole lot. And again, just kind of playing. So we now know that we need to essentially merge these two areas here. So this will be quite a task to blend something, so we'll kind of cut it more towards the middle, use a soft opacity. I have I think I dropped the eraser down to about 50 and 50 here in order to do that. Then I'm going in, again seeing where he is, seeing where the grass layers are, playing. Then I want to cut this edge. Because it's a rock, I want to go back into my brushes and choose a hard edge. And then using the eraser, just cutting down the rocks. I'm using jagged kind of line work to get more convincing rocks. They're pretty forgiving though. So already you can tell, because I have so many windows, it's kind of hard for me to find things. So we're working on this blend here. I'm actually going to name a whole layer called blend. We have an atmosphere on here that's causing these harsh lines, so I'm going to grab the eraser, go into this atmosphere layer, and then kind of soften that up. That was way too hard, so grab a soft edge brush and then drop the opacity down quite a bit. So I'm dropping it to 30 and 40. Again, I'm just pressing 3 on the keyboard and then Shift 4 to do change the opacity and flow. So I'm smoothing out that atmosphere a little bit. Then I'm going into my paintbrush, and this looks terrible at first. Basically, I just want to kind of marry the colors. So I'm just selecting the area, grabbing some of that color. Alt is a color picker when you have any paintbrush or paint bucket on. And then I went to my stamp tool again to get just a little bit of that texture. I turned the flow down and the opacity down, so we're not getting tons of rock or tons of grass in here. Just enough to add a little bit of texture, and then when I play with the opacity of that, we have a little more natural of a blend. Again, the colors kind of work themselves out. Some of those hills kind of blend into one another. And this area here probably won't even be seen. So again, I check with that. Nope, it's over his shoulder, so we just need to blend this area here, and that looks pretty good on that. We might jump into that later, but I'm trying to find what's causing this harsh line here, and it's one of my dark and light layers that I added way early on. So I'm going to delete one of those that's just not doing a whole lot, and then I have a really harsh white here. So I'm going to go ahead, select this whole side, delete it so we don't have any white, and then I'm going to grab my eraser, go to the actual layer where the black is, and then again soft brush, medium opacity, and go in and just kind of soften that edge up a little bit. I'm not a fan of this little conversion point here. That's something I can work on down the road though. And I noticed there's a hill here, just a ghost hill with nothing. That's actually the light that I did on the tree to make the tree blend in, but I really don't need it over here, so I'm grabbing the eraser. And then this whole hill is kind of a problem here, so I need to clean that up at some point. Alright, so all those heads are getting in the way, so I'm going to delete that. Now we're going to try and kind of marry the area of the hill up here. So I don't really want that giant hill going all the way there, so we'll drop this down a little bit, making sure still that this area works well, getting a little bit more of a slope. The clouds now are crooked, so I'll just cut those, paste them, and then blow it up to cover where I cut. It's kind of a sloppy way of doing it because now I have to erase it over here. But we do have some give there with the sky and the hill. So go in. I drop the opacity of that new cloud layer just so I can see what's going on. And then when I bring it back up, you can see that it's the hill's okay. I still need to go in and erase some of that. And then these mountains I think will fade in behind these hills pretty well. So I'm just cleaning up some of that sky atmosphere. We have some hard, odd lines in there. Alright, so turn my clouds back on, shrinking down and just kind of fading those in a bit. As you can tell, there's actually some decent mountains behind there. So I want to just select them, and again I control clicked within the little window. And go to the cloud sky layer that I want to get rid of. So we have some of that blue. We don't need all of that. I don't want to get rid of all of it, but I don't want it to be a harsh layer either. And this grass is just bugging me, so try and use the liquefy tool just to kind of curve the grass naturally down. Grass is super weird in that area, and it looks terrible, so I'm not going to do that. Jump to an eraser, and then the soft edge isn't working, just not convincing as grass, so I'm going to go ahead and just erase that. And then I get sidetracked by noticing that giant seam, so I'm going to go to that layer. Turn off all other layers on top of it, so that way when the computer grabs the information, it grabs the right colors, not something that's already been multiplied and contrasted and all of that. So I'm just using the heal tool to kind of clean up that little seam from where I pasted two images together last time. Alright, so then going in, doing a test, and zooming out is very helpful. Also, we can check on everything in this little corner screen too. And then looking at how he fits into the whole thing. So I do need to get rid of that hill. So I'm jumping to a selection tool to just notch that off so it tucks in behind the hill. This part, and I kind of fight for the rest of the video. If some area is just not really working for you, feel free to go on to a new area as well. Instead of just beating one area to death, you might find a new solution or find out that you even have another hill that you can cover something with. So that hill, and I'm just really not happy with it. It's coming up too far. I'd like it to tuck in a little bit more here. So going to the eraser, getting a hard eraser, Now up here I turned on smoothing. I turned it up to 99%. That is really handy for the mouse. As you can see, you have that long tail that creates a longer surface. That is available in the next version of Photoshop, so I will try to not use it that much. But and then I switched, so I did a hard edge, then I switched to an odd-shaped brush, shrunk it down to get kind of that grass effect on that hill. Not wonderful, still needs some work, but better than it was before. Now I'm selecting that area, making a new layer, and then going to my gradient, and just darkening it to kind of blend in that whole area. That was probably too much. And then we do have a weird edge here. Again, I did this darken as another layer on top of this, so that way we still have all that information preserved underneath with the grass. If I want to change this down the road, I can just affect that darken layer instead of having to completely redo the grass. So what I did there is under View, one of the options is Selection Edges. The item is still selected here, but you can't see the selection edges. That helps for really good fine detailed work. It also is really confusing if you forget that you have a selection, so just keep that in mind if you do go to View, Show, Hide Selection Edges. It will hide those from you, so you can test different kind of side effects. Alright, so just cleaning up the background now, realizing how long it's been. So trying to merge, get some of those mountains in there. I'll duplicate the sky in the background too, where you can see those squares. That basically means that there's a hole all the way through the entire scene. So I'll just duplicate that blue sky in the background and tuck that in as a layer behind everything. Okay. And I'm trying to find where that little shelf is right here. I think I'm actually going to give up before the end of the video. So we're at our composition. We have the background worked in pretty convincingly. We haven't added special effects. I do need to fix this little area up. The video's getting long. So we will have a new video, and I will start working on the guy for next week, and we will dive into this a little bit further and hopefully finish this up in a few more classes. Thanks for watching.